The galaxy had known peace for centuries. Most species lived their lives without fear of war or destruction. But that peace would soon be shattered, and the galaxy would learn just how dangerous it could be to underestimate humanity. The Empire was a mighty force, expanding across the stars with ease. They had conquered many worlds and crushed countless civilizations. It was their way: show no mercy and take what they wanted. When the Empire's leaders decided to attack the human colonies, they thought it would be another easy conquest, just like the others. They couldn't have been more wrong. The humans had made a name for themselves in the galaxy. Their colonies were small, far from the core worlds, and not seen as a significant threat. The Empire believed that bombing these colonies would be a quick and easy way to send a message: submit to the Empire or face destruction, they thought. But they didn't understand the humans. They didn't understand what they had awakened by attacking these seemingly weak settlements. It all started on a quiet, peaceful day. The human colony on Arca 5 was busy with its usual routine. Farmers worked in the fields, scientists studied ancient relics, and children played in the streets. The colony had been established decades ago, a small speck in the grand scheme of the galaxy. The humans who lived there had never known the horrors of war, at least not until that day. Without warning, the skies darkened. Thousands of ships, black as the void, appeared in the atmosphere. The Empire had come, their long-range bombers ready to drop devastating payloads. The colonists had no time to prepare, no time to hide. The bombs fell without mercy, tearing apart cities, destroying homes, and reducing once thriving communities to rubble. The Empire's message was clear: you are nothing. But the Empire had made a fatal mistake. In their arrogance, they did not consider what lay beneath the surface of these peaceful colonies. They did not consider the ancient protectors, the beings that had watched over humanity for centuries, waiting for the day they would rise again. The attack on Arca 5 was only the beginning. It was followed by a wave of attacks on other human colonies. Each bomb that fell, each life that was lost, stirred something ancient. Deep beneath the ground, hidden away from the eyes of the Empire, a force was waking up. The humans had lived in harmony with these beings for generations, unknowingly keeping them alive with their peaceful ways. But the Empire's attack would soon awaken the sleeping giants, creatures far more powerful than any weapon the Empire had ever known. The dragons had always been a myth to most of the galaxy. They were stories told in the quiet corners of human colonies, whispered about by old people who remembered the ancient times. No one had truly believed in their existence, and the Empire certainly didn't. They thought the humans were weak, but in their ignorance, they had woken the dragons. These ancient protectors were not creatures to be trifled with. They had been waiting, hidden beneath the surface of the colonies, for the right moment to rise again. As the bombs fell, the first dragon stirred. It was no larger than a mountain, its scales dark and smooth as obsidian. Its eyes, glowing with a fierce ancient power, opened for the first time in centuries. The ground shook beneath its mighty wings as it broke free from its resting place, roaring in fury. The humans, though shocked, quickly understood what had happened. The dragons were back, and they would protect humanity at any cost. The Empire's forces had no idea what they had unleashed. The first wave of dragons was followed by more. They appeared in the skies, their massive wings blotting out the sun. The alien ships that had bombed the colonies were now targets. The dragons attacked with a fury that sent the invaders fleeing in fear. Their fire was not just flame. It was the force of a star, a heat so intense that it could turn the very air to ash. The Empire's fleets had no chance. The Empire's commanders, watching from their command centers, could hardly believe what they were seeing. Their superior technology, their advanced weaponry, was useless against these creatures. They had never encountered anything like it before. What were these dragons? How had the humans hidden such a force for so long? The truth was simple. The humans had known for generations that they were not alone in the universe. They had lived side by side with the dragons, a species so ancient they had been forgotten by most of the galaxy. The dragons had sworn to protect humanity, and the Empire's attack had awakened that ancient vow. The dragons were ready to fight, to defend the humans from any threat. And now, the Empire was that threat. In a matter of hours, the dragons had turned the tide. The bombed colonies had been reduced to ash, but the dragons did not stop. They tore through the skies, their roars echoing across the galaxy. The Empire's ships were no match for them. The dragons could fly faster than any ship, their firepower far exceeding anything the Empire had. No one had ever expected such an overwhelming force. The Empire had thought the humans weak, easy to destroy. They had made a deadly mistake. As the dragons rampaged through the skies, the Empire's leaders began to panic. They had underestimated humanity and had unknowingly provoked an ancient power they couldn't control. The dragons were not just beasts. They were symbols of the human strength, their resilience, and their untold potential. This was only the beginning. The Empire thought they could easily crush humanity. But what they didn't know was that by bombing the human colonies, they had awakened something far more dangerous than they ever imagined. And now, humanity and their dragons were ready to make them pay. The Empire's forces were retreating, but it was too late. The dragons would not stop until the invaders were destroyed. The ancient power of the dragons had been awakened by one simple mistake, the belief that humanity was weak. The Empire's arrogance had led them to believe they could easily wipe out humanity. But as the dragons soared across the skies, reality set in. The attack on the human colonies had not only triggered the fury of these ancient creatures, but it had also revealed a hidden power within humanity itself, one that even the most advanced technology in the galaxy could not comprehend. As the first wave of dragons wreaked havoc on the Empire's forces, the humans watched in awe and terror. The dragons, once thought to be mere myths, were now a deadly reality. Their massive wings created gusts of wind strong enough to topple entire buildings, and their fiery breath could turn even the toughest ships to dust. The Empire's fleets, once proud and invincible, were no match for the fury of these ancient creatures. Ships were torn apart mid-flight, their crews screaming in panic as they were consumed by flames hotter than the core of a star. On the ground, the human survivors saw the dragons as their salvation. These majestic creatures, with scales that shimmered like molten metal and eyes that glowed with an ancient fire, were their protectors. For centuries, they had remained hidden, watching over humanity, waiting for the right moment to rise and defend the people they had sworn to protect. That moment had arrived. The humans who had once been helpless against the Empire's bombs now found themselves with allies who were more powerful than they could ever have imagined. The dragons, their hearts filled with fury and loyalty to humanity, fought with a relentless rage. They were not just defending the colonies, they were avenging them. As the battles raged on, the Empire's leadership realized that they had made a grave mistake. They had misjudged humanity, thinking that their colonies were nothing more than weak outposts to be easily destroyed. But now, the Empire was faced with an unimaginable force, an unstoppable enemy that had awakened from the depths of the galaxy. The Empire had never encountered a species like humanity before. They were relentless, resourceful, and above all, they had the dragons on their side. The invaders had been taught to fear nothing, but now they were trembling in fear. The dragons' power was beyond anything the Empire had ever witnessed. Their strength was overwhelming, their fire scorching the very air around them. In the command centers of the Empire's warships, panic spread like wildfire. The dragons were unstoppable. The Empire's weaponry, designed to destroy planets and crush entire fleets, was useless against these mighty creatures. The leaders of the Empire quickly realized that their invasion was doomed. They had provoked something far older and more dangerous than they could comprehend. Back on the human colonies, the survivors were beginning to organize. While the dragons fought to protect them, the humans quickly regrouped and began to fight back. They had long ago learned to survive against the odds, And now, with the dragons at their side, they were ready to strike. They knew that this battle was far from over, and that the Empire would stop at nothing to destroy them. But the humans were not afraid. They had awakened the dragons, and now they would fight alongside them. As the battle between the dragons and the Empire's forces escalated, the galaxy watched in shock. News of the dragons' return spread like wildfire, and the Empire's once feared reputation began to crumble. The mighty Empire, which had crushed civilizations across the stars, was now being brought to its knees by a species it had once considered weak. And the humans, once thought to be helpless and insignificant, were now the most dangerous force in the galaxy. The dragons had awakened, and they were not going to stop until the Empire had been crushed beneath their claws. The war had only just begun, and humanity had shown the galaxy that they would never be defeated. The dragons had returned, and they would fight for humanity until the last breath. The Empire's leadership tried to regroup, but it was clear that the tide of the war had turned. The once proud fleets of the Empire were scattered, their ships reduced to smoldering ruins. The humans and their dragons had unleashed a power that the Empire could not even begin to understand. The battle was no longer about defeating humanity. It was about survival. The Empire had poked the hornet's nest, and now they were paying the price. Across the galaxy, whispers of the dragon's return spread. Other species began to take notice. The Empire had been a bully, intimidating weaker civilizations with its might. But now, the balance of power had shifted. Humanity, with the help of the dragons, had proven that they were not to be underestimated. And the galaxy would never forget the lesson they had just learned. But the dragons were not done yet. They were not just fighting to defend humanity. They were fighting to remind the galaxy of a simple truth. Never underestimate the power of the unknown, and never forget the strength that lies in the heart of humanity. As the dust settled and the Empire's forces retreated, the dragons turned their gaze toward the stars. They had defended humanity, but the war was far from over. The Empire had made a deadly mistake, and now the dragons would make sure that the galaxy would never forget what happened when they provoked humanity's ancient protectors. The galaxy had learned its lesson, the hard way. As the dust settled over the wreckage of the Empire's fleets, a tense silence filled the air. The once feared warships, now charred and crumbling, drifted through the void of space, powerless against the overwhelming force of the dragons and humanity. The Empire's commanders, sitting in their command centers, could hardly comprehend what had just happened. They had always been able to control any situation with sheer firepower. But against the combined might of humanity and the dragons, their power seemed insignificant. The Imperial High Command immediately called a meeting. The situation was dire. The once invincible forces that had crushed entire civilizations across the galaxy were now on the brink of collapse. The colonies they had bombed were now not only defended by humans, but by creatures beyond their wildest nightmares. The dragons, once believed to be mere legends, were now real, and they were furious. At the heart of the Empire's struggles lay their biggest mistake: underestimating humanity. For centuries, the Empire had looked at humanity as weak and primitive. They had been content to bomb and destroy their colonies, believing they could easily wipe them out with their advanced technology. But they had forgotten one important fact: humanity had always fought back. Every time they were pushed to the brink of extinction, they found a way to survive. And this time, they had done more than survive. They had awakened the dragons. The Empire's military leaders scrambled to come up with a strategy. They knew that they couldn't defeat the dragons with conventional weapons. The bombs that had once been used to annihilate entire planets were now useless. The dragons' scales were too thick, their fire too intense, and their strength too great. Even the Empire's most advanced warships couldn't stand up to the onslaught. They were powerless. In desperation, the Empire turned to their most secret weapon: biological warfare. They had developed viruses capable of wiping out entire populations in a matter of days. It was a cruel and effective tactic that had served them well in the past. But this time, they had underestimated the humans again. The Empire released the virus, hoping to eradicate humanity and weaken the dragons. But the humans had anticipated such an attack. They had developed their own countermeasures, antidotes, vaccines, and treatments that would render the Empire's biological warfare ineffective. The humans had learned to adapt to any challenge. And now, they were proving it once again. The battle on the ground was no better. The Empire sent waves of soldiers to reclaim the colonies, but the humans fought back with a fury they had never seen before. The dragons, acting as the guardians of the human colonies, swooped down from the skies, tearing apart the Imperial forces with ease. With each strike, the Empire's hopes of victory dwindled. They couldn't win this fight, not with their old tactics, not with their technology, and certainly not with their arrogance. Back on the command ship, the Empire's leaders began to realize the true cost of their mistake. The galaxy had been filled with whispers of the dragon's return, but no one had believed it could happen. They had underestimated humanity, and in doing so, they had provoked the wrath of the very beings that had once protected them. The dragons were not just protectors. They were the ultimate force of nature, capable of wiping out entire empires with the flick of a claw. As the days passed, the Empire's resolve began to crumble. They sent more reinforcements, but the dragons tore through them like paper. Each new wave of soldiers was met with a terrifying fury, and the survivors began to panic. The Empire had thought they could destroy humanity, but now they found themselves on the defensive, their empire crumbling beneath the power of the humans and the dragons. The war had reached a turning point. The Empire had made its move, but now it was humanity and the dragons who held the upper hand. The once feared Empire was being slowly crushed under the weight of its own arrogance, and it seemed that the balance of power in the galaxy was shifting. But the Empire wasn't ready to give up. They still had resources at their disposal, resources they believed could turn the tide in their favor. But the longer they fought, the more it became clear they were fighting a battle they couldn't win. The humans had shown an incredible resolve, and the dragons were their protectors. The Empire had become the hunted, and humanity had become the hunter. As the Empire's forces retreated, the dragons circled above, roaring their triumph. They had returned to defend humanity, and now they were unstoppable. The Empire had made its last move, but it had underestimated the sheer power of the humans and their ancient protectors. The battle for the galaxy was far from over, but with every passing day, it became clear that the dragons and humanity were destined to prevail. The Empire's once unstoppable forces were now on the run, and the galaxy would never forget the lesson it had learned. Never underestimate the power of the unknown, especially when it comes to humanity's ancient protectors. The dragon's rise had only just begun, and the Empire would soon learn that some mistakes can never be undone. The aftermath of the Empire's failed offensive left the galaxy in chaos. While the Empire's fleet limped back, battered and broken, the human colonies had been fully reinforced by the dragons. These legendary beings, once thought to be nothing more than myths, now ruled the skies over humanity's territories. Their return signaled not only the awakening of a powerful force, but the beginning of the end for the Empire's rule. For the first time in centuries, the Empire faced an adversary they couldn't conquer with sheer firepower. The dragons weren't like any species they had ever encountered. They were powerful, intelligent, and fiercely protective of their human allies. Their scales, tough enough to withstand nuclear blasts, made them nearly invulnerable to the Empire's weaponry. Their fire, capable of turning entire fleets into molten slag, was unmatched. And their flight, faster than the fastest warship, allowed them to strike with terrifying precision. The Empire tried to regroup. They had lost a massive portion of their fleet, but they were still one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. They could not let this embarrassment stand. The Emperor called for a full-scale retaliation, desperate to regain control over the colonies they had once dominated with ease. However, every time the Empire launched a new attack, the dragons were there to intercept it. They moved like shadows through space, attacking with the speed and grace of creatures made for war. The Empire's warships couldn't keep up. The battles quickly turned into massacres. The dragons tore through Imperial vessels like they were nothing, their fire scorching the skies, and their claws tearing apart armor as if it were paper. The humans fought alongside the dragons, but it was clear that the true force of destruction came from the ancient creatures themselves. The humans, with their advanced tactics and technology, worked as a support force, guiding the dragons and helping to strategize. But it was the dragons who brought down the wrath. Their roars could be heard across space, a signal of the fury that had been unleashed upon the Empire. The Empire's commanders had been trained to deal with every kind of enemy, from rebellious colonies to entire alien races, but nothing in their long history had prepared them for the sheer force of nature that the dragons represented. Their intelligence was unmatched, and their ability to adapt to the Empire's tactics was terrifying. The dragons had learned to counter every move the Empire made, anticipating their next step before it even happened. As the war dragged on, the Empire grew more desperate. They tried using new weapons, including experimental energy beams and traps designed specifically to kill dragons, but nothing worked. Each attack was repelled. Each new weapon was destroyed. The dragons' adaptability was astounding. They seemed to understand the Empire's technology better than the Empire itself, using it against them in brutal counterattacks. The Emperor, once confident in his ability to crush any enemy, now found himself questioning everything. How had they miscalculated so badly? How had they provoked a force they couldn't control, a force they didn't even understand? He sat in his private chambers, staring at the star map that displayed the battlefronts. What had started as a simple campaign to subdue the humans had escalated into an intergalactic nightmare. His mind raced, looking for a solution, but there were no good options left. He could order the remaining fleets to retreat, but that would be seen as a sign of weakness. The Empire's hold on the galaxy had been based on fear and domination, and a retreat would be an admission of failure. But staying to fight would mean certain destruction. The dragons were unstoppable. They had proven it time and time again. The Emperor was trapped, his options growing more limited with every passing day. As the months went by, the Empire's hold on the galaxy loosened. Human colonies that had once been on the brink of extinction were now thriving, shielded by the dragon's mighty wings. The remaining Imperial forces were scattered and disorganized, struggling to hold on to the territories they had once ruled with an iron fist. But the dragons were relentless, hunting down each fleet, dismantling it, and forcing the Empire into retreat. In the heart of the Empire's capital, the Emperor's advisors gathered to discuss the only remaining course of action. It was clear to everyone that they were losing the war. The dragons were too powerful, the humans were too resilient, and the Empire's resources were dwindling. The Empire needed a miracle. But the Emperor, ever the pragmatist, had no illusions. A miracle wasn't coming. The Empire's reign was over. Their arrogance, their underestimation of humanity, and their failure to understand the dragons had led them to this moment. The dragons had not only returned to defend humanity, they had become the galaxy's new rulers, and the Empire's brutal rule was no more. The final battle was coming, and the Empire's forces were no longer fighting for victory. They were fighting for survival. And in the end, even that would prove impossible. The dragons and humanity had emerged victorious, and the once mighty Empire had been reduced to nothing more than a fading memory in the stars. The dragons' wrath was unrelenting, and their victory inevitable. The Empire had made its last mistake, and the galaxy would never forget it. The news of the dragons' overwhelming victory spread quickly across the galaxy. Everywhere, from the outer colonies to the heart of the Empire's capital, people were talking about it. The once dominant Empire, a force that had conquered entire star systems and oppressed countless species, was crumbling. The dragon-led onslaught had shattered their military might and left their fleet in ruins. But it wasn't just the Imperial forces that had been broken. The very foundation of the Empire's authority was beginning to crumble as well. The Emperor, once revered as the supreme leader of the galaxy, now sat behind his golden throne, staring at the shattered remains of his empire. The defeat had come so quickly, so decisively, that he could barely comprehend what had happened. For years, the Empire had expanded its territories, crushed any opposition, and instilled fear in every species it encountered. But now, in a matter of months, everything had unraveled. The Emperor had relied on fear to maintain control, believing that his advanced technology and massive fleets would keep the galaxy in line. But he had never anticipated that humanity, backed by ancient dragons, would rise up and obliterate his carefully constructed rule. His soldiers, once feared for their discipline and ruthlessness, had been reduced to nothing more than prey, hunted by the dragons that now controlled the skies. And the Empire's fleet, once considered the most formidable in the galaxy, had been decimated in mere moments by creatures thought to be nothing more than myth. As the Emperor sat in silence, his advisors and generals began to gather in the dimly lit chamber. The air was thick with tension, each of them knowing that this meeting was likely the last they would have before the final fall of the Empire. Some of the generals had already fled, unable to face the inevitable collapse. Others still clung to the hope that they could somehow rally their forces, but they knew in their hearts that the dragons and humans had already won. It was only a matter of time before they finished what they had started. "We've lost, Your Excellency," one of the generals spoke up, his voice shaky. "The dragons, they're unstoppable. No fleet, no weapon we have can match their power." The Emperor did not respond. He simply stared at the map of the galaxy before him. Once, every world had been within his grasp. Now, it seemed as though the Empire's influence was slipping away faster than he could react. "We can still make a stand," another general said, trying to maintain some semblance of hope. "If we regroup, if we focus all our remaining forces on the colonies." "Enough," the Emperor snapped, his voice trembling with fury. "There is no more time for stands. There is no more hope. We have failed." The room fell silent. The gravity of the situation hung heavily in the air. They had all known the Empire was weakening, but none of them had expected the end to come so swiftly. The dragons had not only destroyed their fleet, but they had also made the very idea of the Empire's power laughable. What was once the most feared force in the galaxy was now a shadow, a broken empire, its pieces scattered and lost to time. The Emperor's mind raced. He had no more options left. There were no fleets to command, no battles to fight, only the bitter realization that his empire had fallen. He had no allies. No help would come. The humans, who had once been nothing but a nuisance, had proven themselves a deadly adversary. And the dragons, ancient and terrifying, had sided with them, ensuring the Empire's defeat. And yet, despite the hopelessness of the situation, a small, nagging part of him couldn't let go. The Emperor had never been one to give up without a fight. He had clawed his way to the top of the galaxy, using every trick, every method, and every resource at his disposal. Perhaps, he thought, there was still a way out. Perhaps there was some trick he had missed, some last-ditch effort that could turn the tide. "Prepare the escape vessels," he ordered coldly, breaking the silence. "If we cannot hold the Empire, we will at least save ourselves." His advisors exchanged nervous glances. Some were already preparing to abandon the capital, seeking refuge in hidden corners of the galaxy, hoping to survive this disaster. They knew the Empire was gone. The Emperor's reign had ended. It was time to leave, to survive, and perhaps to rebuild in another form, far from the reach of the dragons and their human allies. But the dragons weren't going to allow that. Outside, in the cold expanse of space, the dragons were watching, their massive forms cloaked in the darkness of space. They had seen everything. They knew what the Emperor was planning. The Dragon Alliance had not only brought destruction to the Empire, but also a message that no one could escape the consequences of defying humanity and its allies. The galaxy had seen the dragon's wrath, and now they would make sure that those who had caused this war paid the price. The time for escape had passed. The Empire's leaders would not be given the chance to flee into hiding. The dragons, with their intelligence and power, were already closing in. As the Emperor prepared for his final futile escape, the sky above the capital turned dark. Massive shadows loomed over the once great capital, and the roar of dragons echoed through the void. The Empire had not only lost its fleet, its power, and its influence, but now it was about to lose its very existence. The last remnants of the Empire's power would be erased, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Emperor had made his last mistake. The dragons had arrived, and this time they weren't leaving until the Empire was nothing but a distant memory in the stars. The once mighty Empire's capital now lay in ruins, its towering spires crumbling under the weight of destruction. The streets were littered with debris, and the once bustling city was now eerily silent, save for the occasional roar echoing from the darkened skies above. The dragons had unleashed their fury, and the galaxy would never be the same again. As the last remnants of the Empire's forces scrambled to escape, the dragons descended upon the capital with terrifying precision. Their immense wings cut through the air with ease, their fire scorching the ground below. The humans, led by their Dithworlder cadets, had done their part, but it was the dragons' power that truly brought devastation to the Empire. It was a sight no one had ever seen before: massive creatures, their scales glistening in the light of dying stars, tearing through the remnants of an empire that had once been a symbol of dominance. The dragons were not just beasts of war. They were symbols of vengeance. They had been awakened, and nothing would stop them now. In the heart of the capital, the Emperor stood in his final moments, looking out at the chaos unfolding around him. His advisors had fled, the soldiers were defeated, and there was no escape from the wrath of the dragons. The capital, which had once been the jewel of the Empire, was now reduced to rubble. It was a scene that would be etched into the galaxy's history forever. The dragon's fire had turned the skies red, casting an ominous glow over the shattered city. Each roar was a reminder that the Empire had made a fatal mistake, one they could never undo. The humans and dragons had made their point clear. The Empire's reign was over. There was no coming back from this. But it wasn't just the capital that felt the dragon's wrath. Across the galaxy, the Empire's military outposts and supply stations were being wiped out, one by one. The once powerful fleets of the Empire had been decimated, leaving nothing but smoldering wreckage in their wake. The Empire's greatest weapon, its fleet, had been reduced to ash by the combined might of the dragons and humanity. As the firestorm raged on, the Dithworlder cadets stood at the forefront of the battle. These young soldiers, hardened by their brutal training on their home planets, were the last hope of humanity. They had trained their whole lives for moments like this, and now they were proving their worth. They were the ones who had stood shoulder to shoulder with the dragons, launching their attack with precision and unwavering determination. The cadets had been trained to fight in the most extreme environments, to endure hardships that would break most others. They were used to danger, to death, and to the harsh realities of war. But even they had never imagined they would face an enemy like the dragons. These creatures were not like anything they had ever encountered before. They were ancient, powerful, and most importantly, they were on their side. As the last of the Empire's defenders were wiped out, the Dithworlder cadets stood tall, their weapons still raised in defiance. The dragons had done their part, but it was the humans who had provided the strategy, the coordination, and the willpower to finish the job. Together, they had torn through the Empire's defenses like a hot knife through butter. And as the final battle drew to a close, the dragons turned their attention to the Emperor himself. The once mighty ruler of the galaxy, now reduced to a shell of his former self, stood in the ruins of his throne room, awaiting the inevitable. He had failed. He had made the mistake of underestimating humanity, and now he would pay the price. The dragons descended upon him, their massive forms filling the sky. The Emperor didn't even flinch as they landed before him. There was no point in running. He had nowhere left to go. He was the last of his kind, the last remnant of a broken empire, and he knew his time had come. With a deafening roar, the dragons unleashed their final fury. The flames that had once destroyed entire fleets now consumed the Emperor's throne room, erasing the last vestiges of his rule. The galaxy would never forget the day the Empire fell, but more importantly, it would remember the day humanity and the dragons united to bring down an oppressive regime that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. The fire burned bright, consuming everything in its path. The Emperor, his empire, and everything he had built were gone. The galaxy was forever changed, and the dragons, once thought to be myth, had proven themselves to be the true rulers of the stars. In the aftermath of the battle, the Deathworlder cadets stood in silence, their mission complete. They had wiped out a century-old empire in a matter of minutes, and they had done it with the help of their dragon allies. The galaxy was free once again, and the dragons had claimed their place as the true kings of the stars. But as the cadets looked up at the darkened sky, they knew that this victory was only the beginning. There would be other battles, other challenges to face. The galaxy was vast, and there were always new threats lurking in the shadows. But for now, humanity and the dragons stood victorious, their bond stronger than ever before. Together, they had shown the galaxy what true power looked like. And as they looked toward the future, they knew that no empire, no species, and no force in the galaxy would ever dare challenge them again. The dragons had risen, and humanity had proven its worth. The galaxy would never forget the day they wiped out a century-old alien siege in just 20 minutes. The dust settled across the galaxy. The flames of war that had burned so brightly now dimmed, leaving behind a quiet but undeniable sense of victory. The Empire was no more, its remnants scattered and forgotten. The galaxy that had once lived in fear of its rule now stood free, but the taste of freedom was bittersweet. Humanity, with its newfound allies, the dragons, had shifted the balance of power in ways that no one could have predicted. But this was just the beginning. The Deathworlder cadets, young soldiers who had played such a crucial role in this unexpected victory, found themselves in the midst of a new reality. The dragons, once thought to be creatures of myth, had proven to be the ultimate allies, their power and fury unmatched by any force in the galaxy. Together, they had erased a century-old empire in mere minutes. Their bond, forged in the fires of battle, would change the course of history forever. The cadets, though victorious, had no time to rest. The galaxy was still a vast and unpredictable place. Even without the Empire, there were many forces out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for their moment to strike. The peace that had been won came at a cost, and now it was up to these young soldiers to ensure that the galaxy remained safe. The dragons, too, had no interest in ruling with an iron fist. They had made their point, showing the galaxy the power they wielded and the loyalty they held to humanity. But they had no intention of creating a new empire. Instead, they had a vision, a galaxy united by strength, by respect, and by the shared understanding that no one could ever again oppress or dominate the others. The dragons, for all their terrifying might, believed in balance. In the aftermath of the battle, a council was formed, a council made up of humans, Deathworlder cadets, and dragons. Together, they would decide the fate of the galaxy, ensuring that no single species, no single empire, would ever again rise to threaten the peace they had fought so hard for. The galaxy would remain free, but it would need leadership, it would need wisdom, and it would need the strength to defend itself against any who would seek to disrupt the fragile peace they had secured. The dragons, who had once been feared as mythical beasts, now stood as powerful symbols of unity. They had destroyed the empire, but they had not sought to replace it with their own dominance. Instead, they sought to protect, to guide, and to ensure that the lessons of the past were never forgotten. The Deathworlder cadets, now hailed as heroes, became the foundation of the new order. Their training, their resilience, and their courage had proven invaluable in the face of overwhelming odds. They had helped bring down the empire, but now they would help build a new future, a future where no empire would rise to oppress others. The galaxy had been forever changed by the fall of the empire and the rise of the dragons. But it was not just the power of the dragons or the bravery of humanity that had won the day. It was the realization that the true strength of the galaxy lay not in domination, but in cooperation. Humanity and the dragons had shown that, together, they could overcome any obstacle, defeat any enemy, and bring about a new era of peace. As the new council began its work, the Deathworlder cadets and their dragon allies stood side by side. The galaxy was theirs to protect, and they would not allow history to repeat itself. They had been the ones to wipe out a century-long alien siege in 20 minutes, and now they would ensure that the galaxy would never again be torn apart by the ambition of those who sought to rule it. The message was clear. The galaxy belonged to all its inhabitants, and no single species would ever again hold dominion over the others. The dragons had made their mark, and humanity had proven that it was capable of standing toe-to-toe with the galaxy's most fearsome forces. Together, they had created a new order, one built on strength, unity, and the unwavering belief that no one species should ever again try to dominate another. And so, as the stars twinkled in the distance, the Deathworlder cadets looked to the future. They knew there would be challenges ahead, but they were ready. They had faced the impossible, and they had triumphed. They were no longer just soldiers. They were protectors, guardians of the new galaxy, a galaxy where no one would ever again make the mistake of underestimating humanity or the power of their dragon allies. The galaxy had changed forever, but one thing was certain: no force, no species, and no empire would ever dare threaten it again. The dragons had awakened, and humanity had shown the galaxy what true power looked like. The future was bright, and together, they would ensure that it stayed that way.